Merry Christmas. Today I want us to talk about something. This is Dr. Law here back again. Today I want us to talk about the issue to do with public versus private institutions in our country, Kenya. And this mostly has been triggered by the recent release of the Kenya Junior School examination and subsequent placement of the learners into senior schools. Now, from the recent results of junior secondary schools, many learners passed their examination. But when the results for placement in senior secondary school came out, a majority of the parents of these learners were up in arms complaining why, for instance, a student who has been learning at a junior secondary school in Mombasa has been placed in a day school in a far-flung area, which is a senior school. Another group of parents also were complaining that there are learners who had been learning in private primary schools, private junior schools, were denied opportunities to be admitted to the traditional national schools or the traditional C1 schools category. The government came up with a strategy whereby they were saying that the students were placed according to the pathways that they had chosen in before they sat for their exams, talking about sports, talking about social science, and talking about the STEM. And you realize that many parents are obsessed by this thing called STEM. Remember, scientists cannot operate in isolation. Scientists need people who can write about their stories. Scientists need economists to be able to project about their economies. They need finance experts to be able to manage their finances. They also need artists to be able to entertain them. So all these so-called pathways are important, and they play a critical role in making a complete society. So I don't know why people are so much obsessed with this thing called STEM, whereby majority of parents are very sad if their students have not been placed in a STEM pathway, or if their students don't pursue the STEM pathway. And even if those who are very weak, even the ones which are very weak, are being stemmed for the STEM pathway. Okay, that conversation aside, unless I digress. Now, my main reason of coming to this video today, or having this video today, is to talk about this fallacy whereby the middle class people have propagated a middle class syndrome far too long. You see, education as an undertaking, the main goal is to be an equalizer. So education should play a role of making equalization in the society. That is, regardless of someone's background, people should be able to have equal opportunities in life through education. But now look at this. A parent had ability to take their kid to a private academy from grade 1 all the way to grade 9 through junior school. But now when it comes to placement in secondary school, or in senior school as they call it in the new curriculum, they have a problem continuing to take their children through public senior schools all the way to public universities. So they feel bad when the government decides to give priority to the learners who are learning in public primary schools and public junior schools in the public senior schools. Now, if you look at the circumstances and the conditions that are surrounding learners in public junior schools and those that are experienced by those learners in in the private junior schools, you find that the students in the public junior schools are underprivileged compared to their counterparts in the private junior schools. Now, if you are able to afford the fees, why would it be that when it comes to placement in the senior schools, you now want to be up in arms and complain on how you have been marginalized and sidelined? Now, the only problem that I have is that the middle class are a lot in this country that are really pretending. They pretend that everything is okay, yet our systems are not working. And because they can afford a few or a little luxuries here and there, they want to imagine that everything is okay. They are not bothered with the governance system. They are not bothered with the systems that are supposed to work. Theirs, because they can afford treatment, because they have an insurance cover in a private hospital, even for a slight malaria, and if there are no drugs in a public hospital, they don't care. Them, they are okay. Because they can be able to take their kids to an academy, because they can be able to afford, if the public schools are suffering, the primary ones and the junior ones are suffering for lack of teachers and lack of important equipment that are used for learning, they don't care and they don't want to get bothered, because to them, they feel they are already able to afford. But who knows? Today you can be able to afford, tomorrow you might be no more, you die, and the only option remaining for your child is to go through the public system. So if the public system is not lucrative, if the public system is not working, who should be able to push for its working? It is you, the middle class, who pretends that you have everything that is fine in life to be able to support your children and to support your life, and you don't care about what happens in the public institutions. I want to say this categorically here, that it's important that we take it upon ourselves and make it a collective responsibility, that everybody should be bothered about the systems in the public institutions, whether we have interests there, whether we are stakeholders there or not. For example, people should be able to bother about the operations and the workings of public schools, even if their children are attending private schools. But again, the first world have done it. The countries that we want to emulate, that we are really coveting to reach their status, the first economies, have made their public systems to be so seamless and so operational and working to the extent that the private sector cannot be able to survive. Their public hospitals are top-notch. Their public transport system is top-notch. If you go to their public schools, they are the best. But here in Kenya, we want to pretend that because a few cliques of individuals are able to afford services in the private wing of institutions, now they don't care, they don't bother, they don't want to know what happens in the public institutions. These are the kind of people who tell you that, let me take my kid to a private academy and then a private junior school. But now when that kid is placed somewhere else other than the traditional public senior schools, they are up in arms claiming that the government is unfair. If you are able to afford, why not continue with the private systems? Again, I want to think, or rather I want to believe that nobody indeed chooses to be born in underprivileged family or in a humble family background, for that matter. We all find ourselves where we are somehow without choice. So the only thing that our people who are in leadership and who are in policy making tables should do is to work clock round to ensure that our public systems are working. I want to also talk about some of the politicians, because they know very well that their children are not in the country, their children don't study locally. all their children are taken internationally outside the country to study abroad, they also don't care about how our public systems operate and the status of the operation of our public systems. But how I wish as Kenyans we would take it as a collective responsibility that we are concerned with the operations and the working of our public system, so that the public systems can work for everyone, so that everyone can be able to enjoy and be able to give always priority to the public sector. When we sick, we go to the public hospitals as our first line of defense. And when we go there, we find there are enough drugs, there are motivated staff, doctors, nurses, and all those other clinicians. If we go to public schools, we find that there are enough learning materials, the equipment are available, the teachers are motivated and well remunerated, etc. So I think for us as a country, we need to rethink. Even as we dream about a journey to being a first world country from being a third world country, the first thing we need to think of is how do we make our public systems to become operational. This mentality of middle class syndrome, whereby majority of us think that because they can be able to afford a few luxuries here and there, they can be able to afford to take their kids to academies, and now they don't care about what happens in the public primary schools. And in fact, you find some of them would be able to casually say that why would you be bothered if my kids cannot be able to learn there? So again, I want to find it so absurd or so awkward for somebody who pays taxes and whose taxes are utilized to operate to operationalize things in the public sector, talking about not being bothered or not being interested in what happens in the public institutions. Another thing I want to talk about is that I would like to urge the minister that is concerned, especially in the education matters, to keep put and ensure that they come up with a policy or an affirmative action policy that ensures that all the kids who learn in public schools are given priority first when it comes to the selection in the senior schools, so that they transition from public school to another public school. Let those who have been learning in the private schools and the academies to keep on transitioning to the academies and the private schools in senior school level all the way to the university level, because their parents had decided that they can be able to afford. There is another problem that is really, really bedeviling and killing this country, where people, instead of confronting challenges, they want to run away from the challenges. For example, as a parent, if you find that you have your kid or your child in a public school and you realize that they are not doing things as per your expectation, why do you take out your kids to a private school instead of facing the stakeholders concerned to ensure that the public school becomes the better school that you envisage, the better school that you want to see? I know there are some private schools which are well managed, well operated, and they operate, and people might imagine that they are private schools. I think it is just negligence and carelessness that we have on the part of the people who are supposed to manage these institutions. And it is high time we make people accountable. It is high time as stakeholders we ensure that anybody who is charged with the responsibility to offer any service in any public institution is held accountable. They should be able to report to the public. They should be able to have a scorecard which the public can be able to scrutinize, to be able to know whether they are doing the right thing or not. And if not, they should be shown the door, because there are so many, very many people who are qualified, who can be able to do or can be able to undertake or discharge those responsibilities. Now, if I talk about again the middle class people. These are the people who have been the genesis of so many systemic problems that we have in this country, because they don't care. They are earning a few coins from their jobs. There are jobs that keep them from January to December. So they feel that they have made it. Maybe they have a small car there, a comfortable two-bedroom rented apartment somewhere, and they can be able to take their kids for a small outing. So they imagine that with them, they have reached, they have arrived, they have achieved actualization. And therefore they don't really bother about what happens with their taxes. But again, if you look at this caliber of people, these are the people who are very highly taxed. When you look at the tax system, the pay as you earn tax, they pay a lot of money to the government, and these monies should be able to be collected and taken to a consolidated fund so that they can be spent to provide public services. And one of the public service is education. Another public service is health. The other one is transport. So these public systems should be able to work, and they can only work if we hold people who are in charge accountable. In fact, we need to come up with a policy and a strategy whereby people can be able to appraise the public officers who are in public institutions. The people can be able to give scorecard and score, or rather, and measure the output that is given by the people who have been charged with the responsibilities of offering or rendering services in the public institutions or the public entities. So the only people who can be able to make the public systems to work are the so-called middle class, who instead of facing the problems that are challenging or the problems that are bedeviling the public institutions, they instead decide to run away, and they create a thriving business for the private sector. You will find them in thronging the private hospitals with insurance covers that have been given to them by their so-called employers, and yet they don't care about what happens in the public hospitals. Whether there are no drugs, whether there are no doctors, they don't really bother. They are the ones whom you will find taking their kids to academies, imagining that they can be able to afford it comfortably, and yet at the back you find that they again start complaining. And when we do this, when we have this carefree attitude and I don't care attitude, we are really making the public sector to collapse and giving room for the private sector to monopolize the systems and thrive. And when the private sector thrive, of course, some of them are not interested in providing these services. These institutions that call themselves private institutions, they are money minting institutions, and they are there to mint money from the gullible Kenyans who imagine that they have made it, who imagine that they can be able to afford. Take an example of a private hospital that charges you a consultation fee for 5,000. Seeing a doctor, the same doctor, if you meet him in a referral public institution, they will charge you only 1,000 shillings or 500 shillings. Now, between the 5,000 and the 1,000, which one is affordable? Are we able to ensure that we embark on accountability? And this accountability begins with the system, the citizens, the so-called middle class. The moment we will deal with the middle class syndrome in Kenya, that is the moment we will begin our journey to Singapore. The middle class have failed in providing the much needed clear direction on how governance and how public institutions needs to be run. They don't care. So if they don't care because they can be able to afford, what about the poor who don't have options? Where will they go? Who will be their defender? Who will be their advocate? Because they cannot be able to afford private academies. They will take their children to private schools. The private schools, yes, they have their own challenges here and there. Then again, when they are sick, they can't be able to afford the Aga Khans, the Nairobi hospitals, and the Gertrudes of this world. They would go to a dispensary somewhere or a level 4 hospital somewhere in the county or at the sub-county level, where in many cases you would go, there is nothing. There is no drugs, there are no medical equipment, even the doctors themselves are not there. So who will advocate for these people who do not have the affordability privilege, who do not have the privilege to afford? Who will fight for them in this country? And we are seeing this thing, and it is happening, and nobody is bothered. Can we have a discourse? Can we have a conversation about our public systems, our public institutions, vis-a-vis our private institutions? Why are we allowing the private sector to run a monopolistic system in this country, bringing in a culture not of competition, but a culture of thuggery? Many people are being charged more than they are supposed to pay for services. For example, why would a kid in kindergarten, in an academy, pay school fees that is equivalent to a college student in a public university? Why would somebody pay consultation fee in a private hospital that is equivalent to treating or having one chemotherapy session in a public hospital? So if we continue this way, where are we going to end as a country? Today we are being told that we need to move from a third world to first world. But some of these first world countries, their public systems are really operational. They are working. And because they are working, the private monopoly mind cannot thrive in those countries. In Kenya, we have been left on our own. A few people who are able to invest in providing services or providing private services are minting millions from the gullible middle class people with the middle class mentality and syndrome, not knowing. Some of this money you spend in the academies, you spend in the private hospitals, you spend in watching private televisions, can be used to plan for your retirement. Why would you retire a pauper? Because you want to prove a point. What kind of point do you want to prove? Let's be honest. Let's have an honest conversation over and around this matter as a country. Thank you.